Welcome back. Now we start the program in earnest, and we're going to be looking at the 2015 budget. The Senate on Tuesday passed a 4.493 trillion naira budget for the 2015 fiscal year, about 5 months after it was presented by the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister for the Economy, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. The national budget, which was earlier passed by the House of Reps, was 51 billion naira higher than the 4.42 trillion submitted to both chambers of the National Assembly by the federal government. Now, to look at the implications of this passing the budget at this time and also discussing the contents of it, with us this morning, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Henry Boyo, an economist. Good morning. Dr. Boniface Chizie, who's a renowned economist as well.
Thank you very much. As
well as Mr. Pascal Odibo, who is a financial consultant. Good morning, and thank you all very much for joining us this morning. Before we begin to look at the budget itself, let me start with you, Dr. Chizie. What is the implication of having our budget passed at the end of April, 4 months into the year? I mean, the whole quarter is gone.
Well, I think the implications are obvious, really, to all concerned. I mean, the budget is a blueprint that should drive the economy for a whole year. And then we take 5 months, 6 months. And this is perennial. It's not something that just happened. It's happened before. So one of the things that this incoming administration will have to see how they can tackle. Because we've been on this, and we're talking about this, and we say that, you cannot have a budget that you're supposed to implement in 12 months, and you're having it approved 6 months, 5 months after. Then what's there left to implement? And for that, then, because you have the current expenses, it goes on. You have to pay salaries and wages and all whatnot. You have it goes on. You pay those ones. But what about the capital budget, capital expenditure? Now, you really look at the capital expenditure budget. When you look at this budget, you are talking of 600 billion. As capital expenditure. And then instead you have unemployment is a major issue in this country. And to the extent that you don't begin to have capital projects, begin to implement capital projects and begin to have growth in the economy and begin to have jobs, and then you have problems. And so, I mean, we said this, and part of the reasons why this has been so is the fact that the sort of collaboration which we would expect, between the executive and the National Assembly. That should be there. So I've been saying that the National Assembly should have a budget office, robust budget office. This guy has a National Legislative Political Commission, Dr. Sam Hamadi, used to be in the budget office. When Ken Namani was here. You need to have a robust budget office so that that's collaboration. And so if you go forward and backwards and so on and so forth, so when the budget is ready, the issue of approval will not get what we're experiencing now. And I look at the issue, the content and so on and so forth, that the budget again is always increased whenever it goes in. And there are issues that I expect will address.
Yeah, that's the next question I want to raise, and I will put that to Mr. Boyo. I mean, the budget, it came out 51 billion naira higher. I mean, does the legislature have the right to increase the budget in that way?
The legislature is supposed to make a contribution into the budget, but I honestly don't think that the issue of the 51 billion is alarming. What is really alarming is the structure of the budget itself, the content of the budget, and the provisions which have been made in order to be able to drive the economy in the next 6-7 months. Because, I mean, it's clear that there has never been any serious attempt by previous administrations to ensure that they work the budget. In order to reform the process, technocrats were brought all over the world to come and ensure that this is done. Unfortunately, they all failed. In fact, it got worse because we're now talking of May, and the budget has just been passed. Having said that, you find that the structure of the budget in terms of the capital and recurrent expenditures which have been included in the 2015 budget, leaves a room for a lot of questions. For example, the intention of government, as spelled out by government, was to ensure that they would drive the growth of capital infrastructure in Nigeria in the last 4 years. But surprisingly, you find a situation where every year the budget for capital expenditure has consistently been reduced. And that must worry everyone, because you are told, oh, we recognize that there is a problem and we are going to solve it. But instead of going in the direction of the solution, you start going in the reverse gear. Lagos State, for example, has had initial problems of structure of a budget in terms of fiscal and recurrent. But at the moment, I think I said the last budget, they had succeeded in making capital about 60% of the total expenditure, which is commendable. So if a state like Lagos could do it, why? Because, and they were able to do it because they demonstrated commitment and seriousness. They knew what they wanted to do. You find that in the center, there isn't that same motivation to ensure that the budget is passed on time and so that it can be implemented. You see, in addition to the disparity, the huge disparity between fiscal and recurrent expenditure, you also have no idea of the amount of debt that would be accumulated over time in the process of the 2015 budget. Because, for example, fuel subsidy has not been included. We are told that there's only a deficit of about 1 trillion naira. But this may not be so if you factor in the issue of fuel subsidy, which averagely should be about 500 billion annually, which should then, added to the declared deficit of about 1 trillion, come to about 1.5 trillion. And you're talking of total expenditure of 4.5 trillion. So in other words, you will be servicing your debt with about 1.5 trillion, which is 33% of the total amount of money you spend. That is not what you would expect from a rational government. That is not what you would expect from any person or group of people who confidently tell you that they are seriously interested in transforming your life.
But in this case, you know, they're spending about 21% of the budget on debt servicing.
When you factor in the issue of fuel subsidy, okay, that's another 500 billion. It means you're going to add 500 billion naira to already almost 1 trillion naira declared deficit, you know, formally declared deficit. And all that together means that you have, you're borrowing 33% of your budget, and that's not serious economic management at all.
Well, Mr. Bailey, we have been hearing from the grapevine that the issue of subsidy may be in our past.
It's on the budget.
No,
it may be taken out altogether.
Well, we don't know for certain. The Senate Committee Chairman, Senator McAfee, refuted the allegation or the report that the subsidy would be removed. In fact, he indicated that a total of about 143 billion have actually been allocated to subsidy. 100 billion for petrol and 43 billion for kerosene. But the question is, how can you allocate 143 billion when historically, the list you have spent or that have been declared to have been spent is usually above 500 billion. So if you know that, how can you then say that you have allocated 143 billion, knowing fully well that you already have this huge deficit within the budget, and you're now talking of 143? If the governor, president-elect, is not careful, this would be the initial obstacle in the attack, because you'd have a situation where 143 billion, you know that's not even enough to pay the subsidy values of, you know. So would he be courageous enough to say, you know, let's knock off subsidy? And if he does that, the laborers have organized labor has already firmly set their position and said they are going to reject it. Okay? The reality, of course, is that you will probably find what I would call, in inverted commas, an amicable solution as usual, and they say, okay, let's take a halfway, and but it would only be for another 6 months, 1 year, so long as you have an exchange rate that is continuously depreciating. You will continue to have a higher price of fuel, because if, for example, today the naira becomes 300 naira to a dollar, for example, you'll be talking seriously, which is not off the cards. You'll be talking seriously of petrol in the region of about 250. So even if it's at 250 naira per liter, that's still not the end, because so long as you continue to have depreciation of the naira, you would continue. A lot of people don't seem to understand the connection between exchange rate and the price of fuel. Even if the price of crude oil remains stable on the market, so long as your exchange rate is depreciating, your price of fuel will be increasing. So you are caught up in the trap, what do I do? And the sensible thing to do is say, what causes the depreciation of my naira? Why is it continuously under pressure? And the answer is very simple, demand and supply. When you have a system where the central bank itself consciously creates and deliberately deluges the system with so much naira every month, consciously, deliberately deluging the system with so much naira every month, and at the same time, the same agency comes and rations the dollars in the market and juxtaposes ration dollars against huge, of course you have naira depreciation. So long as that system, that irrational system continues, you are going to continue to have a depreciation of the naira, and so long as you continue to have a depreciation of the naira, you continue to have higher fuel prices, and it will be almost impossible in order for you to be able to abolish subsidy. But having said so, I just paint a bizarre predicament. There is a way to handle it, and the way is, how do you solve the excess liquidity in the system? Who punches the excess liquidity in the system? Who pours it? Does it rain from heaven as drops of water or drops of cash? No. Somebody deliberately creates that excess liquidity. Excess liquidity means that there's surplus money in the system. Can you imagine anything that is surplus becoming expensive? Have you ever thought of anything in this world that when it's getting more surplus, it becomes more expensive? The naira is supposed to be in surplus, and yet people are borrowing it at 20%, 25%, or thereabouts. These are contradictions which are the result of the process of infusing the forex revenue, the dollar revenue we earn from crude oil, into the system. The irrational, inconsistent, and distorted manner in which it is done, that is by CBN continuously printing naira in replacement of the dollars, and then consciously putting rations of the dollars against the huge naira in the system. You will never get anywhere. Take it from me.